The studio buzzed with anticipation as Stephen Colbert, the sharp-witted host, prepared to welcome Elon Musk, a figure whose name alone sparked fascination and controversy. The YouTube channel, known for dissecting the raw, unfiltered moments of talk show exchanges, had hyped this episode as a must-watch. Tonight, the audience sensed something electric in the air, a tension that went beyond the usual banter. Colbert, with his knack for blending humor and pointed commentary, had a reputation for challenging guests, but Musk was no ordinary guest. He was a visionary to some, a provocateur to others, and his recent moves in the tech world had ignited fierce debates across social media. What would happen when these two personalities collided? Could Colbert keep the conversation light, or would Musk's unpredictable nature steer it into uncharted territory? Was this the night when the polished facade of late-night television would crack under the weight of real conflict? The segment began with Colbert easing into the interview, his questions laced with his signature charm. He probed Musk about his latest ventures, particularly his push to integrate artificial intelligence into everyday life. The topic was timely, as public discourse swirled around the ethics of AI, from job displacement to privacy concerns. Musk responded with his usual blend of confidence and cryptic insight, deflecting concerns with grand visions of a future where technology solved humanity's greatest problems. But beneath the surface, a subtle friction emerged. Colbert's questions grew sharper, pressing Musk on the societal costs of his ambitions. Why should people trust tech moguls to prioritize humanity over profit? Wasn't there a risk that AI could deepen inequality, leaving millions behind? The audience leaned in, sensing the shift. Musk's answers, though articulate, carried an edge, as if he were tiring of justifying his work to skeptics. Colbert, sensing an opening, pivoted to a recent controversy: Musk's public statements about regulating AI. The host framed it as a contradiction, noting that Musk had once warned about AI's dangers, but now championed its rapid development. The question wasn't just a jab, it was a challenge to Musk's credibility. The guest's expression tightened, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward. The studio grew quieter, the laughter from earlier fading into murmurs. Musk countered, explaining that his warnings were about unchecked AI, not innovation itself. But Colbert didn't relent, doubling down with a quip that implied Musk was more interested in headlines than responsibility. The audience gasped, some chuckling nervously. Had Colbert gone too far? Was Musk about to unravel, or would he rise to the bait? The exchange escalated as Colbert pressed further, questioning whether Musk's wealth and influence skewed his perspective on what society needed. It was a loaded accusation, one that painted Musk as out of touch. The guest's demeanor shifted, his usual cool confidence giving way to a flicker of irritation. He responded with a pointed remark, suggesting that Colbert's platform thrived on oversimplifying complex issues for laughs. The retort stung, and for a moment the host's smile faltered. The audience could feel the temperature rising. This wasn't the playful sparring they'd expected. It was a clash of egos, each man digging in. The YouTube channel's promise of raw commentary felt prophetic now, as viewers at home wondered how far this would go. Would Colbert regain control, or was Musk about to turn the tables in a way no one saw coming? The segment teetered on the edge of chaos. Colbert, perhaps sensing the need to lighten the mood, tried to steer the conversation toward Musk's space exploration efforts, but the damage was done. The earlier accusation hung in the air, and Musk wasn't ready to let it go. His next response carried a sharper tone, accusing Colbert of pandering to an audience that didn't understand the stakes of technological progress. The insult landed like a slap, rude and unapologetic. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and boos, torn between loyalty to their host and intrigue at Musk's audacity. Colbert's face flushed, his composure tested as he prepared to fire back. The stage was set for a confrontation that would define the night, one that would leave the YouTube channel's viewers glued to their screens, eager to see who would emerge unscathed. The studio crackled with tension as Stephen Colbert grappled with Elon Musk's biting retort. The guest's accusation that Colbert pandered to an ignorant audience lingered like a challenge unmet. The host, known for his quick wit, couldn't let such an insult slide, not with thousands watching live and millions more to dissect the moment on the YouTube channel later. Colbert leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and calculation. He responded with a pointed jab, questioning whether Musk's lofty ideas were just a distraction from the chaos his companies often left in their wake. The audience roared, some clapping in support, others murmuring in discomfort. The line between entertainment and confrontation blurred, and the energy in the room felt like a taut wire ready to snap. Musk, unyielding, didn't flinch. His posture stiffened, and his voice took on a colder edge as he countered, framing Colbert's critique as the kind of lazy cynicism that stifled progress. He spoke of the sacrifices he'd made, the sleepless nights spent solving problems most couldn't fathom. The audience sensed a shift. Musk wasn't just defending himself, he was laying bare a conviction that felt raw, almost personal. Colbert, perhaps caught off guard by the intensity, tried to pivot with a lighter question about Musk's public persona, but the guest wasn't having it. He doubled down, accusing the host of twisting his words to fit a narrative that sold ad space. The crowd gasped, the audacity of the remark sending ripples through the studio. It was a low blow, implying Colbert's integrity was for sale, and it stung deeply. The host's face tightened, his usual charm giving way to a flash of anger. He fired back, suggesting that Musk's obsession with being a savior blinded him to the real-world harm his ventures sometimes caused. The accusation was specific, referencing recent debates about automation displacing workers, a topic that resonated with many in the audience. The room grew restless, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. Musk's eyes narrowed, and for a moment he seemed to weigh his next move. Then, with a calculated calm, he turned the tables, questioning why Colbert never challenged the powerful interests that shaped public opinion. The implication was clear. The host was a hypocrite picking easy targets while ignoring bigger culprits. The audience erupted, some cheering Musk's boldness, others booing the perceived disrespect. Colbert, now visibly rattled, struggled to maintain his footing. His next remark, meant to regain control, came off as defensive, accusing Musk of dodging accountability by attacking the messenger. But the guest was relentless, his words cutting deeper as he painted Colbert as a performer more interested in viral moments than truth. The exchange felt less like an interview and more like a duel, each man probing for weakness. The YouTube channel's viewers watching later would feel the weight of every word, the raw emotion pulling them deeper into the drama. The studio audience, meanwhile, was torn, their loyalty to Colbert tested by Musk's unapologetic conviction. As the segment neared its breaking point, Colbert made a risky move. He brought up a recent social media storm, where Musk's comments on AI ethics had sparked outrage among activists. The host framed it as recklessness, suggesting Musk didn't care about the consequences of his words. The accusation was meant to put Musk on the defensive, but it backfired. The guest leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with fury, and unleashed a response that shifted the entire dynamic. He accused Colbert of exploiting controversies to boost ratings, of pretending to care about issues while ignoring their complexity. The crowd fell silent, the weight of the rebuke hanging heavy. Colbert's expression betrayed a flicker of doubt, and for the first time, he seemed outmatched. The stage was set for an even fiercer clash, one that would push the confrontation to its limits and leave the audience questioning who would crack first. The studio held its breath as Elon Musk's scathing rebuke left Stephen Colbert reeling. The guest's accusation that the host exploited controversies for ratings cut deeper than any jab thrown so far. Colbert, visibly shaken, struggled to mask the sting, his usual composure fraying at the edges. The audience, caught in the crossfire of this verbal sparring, sensed a turning point. The YouTube channel's promise of raw, unfiltered commentary felt fully realized now, as the clash between the two men veered into territory that was as uncomfortable as it was riveting. Colbert, determined to reclaim control, leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with defiance. He challenged Musk's moral high ground, questioning whether the guest's relentless pursuit of innovation excused the collateral damage left in its wake. Musk's response was swift and unrelenting. He turned the question back on Colbert, accusing the host of cherry-picking examples to paint a distorted picture. The guest's tone grew sharper, his words dripping with disdain as he suggested Colbert thrived on outrage, feeding an audience hungry for simplistic villains. The insult was brazen, implying the host was complicit in the very media circus he claimed to critique. The crowd murmured, some gasping at the audacity, others nodding as if Musk had voiced a truth they'd long suspected. Colbert's eyes flashed with anger, but he held back, perhaps sensing that an emotional outburst would only embolden his opponent. Instead, he pivoted, bringing up a recent public backlash against Musk's labor practices, framing it as evidence of the guest's disregard. For ordinary workers, the accusation struck a nerve. Musk's face hardened, and for a moment the studio felt the weight of his silence. Then, with a voice low and deliberate, he countered, exposing what he saw as Colbert's hypocrisy. He pointed out the host's silence on the entertainment industry's own labor issues, from underpaid writers to exploited crew members. The remark was a masterstroke, turning the spotlight back on Colbert's world and forcing the audience to question the host's selective outrage. Cheers mingled with boos, the room divided between those who saw Musk as a truth-teller and those who felt he'd crossed a line. The YouTube channel's viewers watching later would feel their pulses quicken, the drama pulling them deeper into the unraveling spectacle. Colbert, now on the defensive, tried to regain the upper hand. He accused Musk of deflecting, of using personal attacks to avoid accountability for his actions. But the host's words lacked their earlier bite, and the audience could sense his struggle. Musk seized the moment, his next response laced with a quiet intensity that commanded attention. He spoke of the bigger picture, of a world on the brink of collapse if bold risks weren't taken. He framed Colbert's critiques as short-sighted, the kind of rhetoric that kept society stagnant. The guest's conviction was palpable, and for the first time, some in the audience began to waver, their loyalty to Colbert tested by the force of Musk's argument. The confrontation reached a fever pitch as Colbert, desperate to shift the narrative, made a bold move. He referenced a viral moment from Musk's past, a flippant comment that had fueled accusations of arrogance. The host wielded it like a weapon, suggesting it revealed Musk's true character. The audience leaned in, expecting the guest to falter. But Musk was ready. His eyes locked onto Colbert's, and with a voice that carried both fury and clarity, he unleashed a response that turned the entire exchange on its head. He accused the host of building a career on mocking others while hiding behind the guise of humor. The words were rude, cutting, and unapologetic, landing like a blow to Colbert's pride. The studio erupted, the crowd's reaction a chaotic mix of shock and exhilaration. Colbert's face flushed, his control slipping further as Musk stood poised to deliver the final strike. The stage was set for a reckoning, one that would leave the audience stunned and the YouTube channel's viewers desperate to see how it would end. The studio pulsed with raw energy as Elon Musk's brutal accusation hung in the air, branding Stephen Colbert a hypocrite who mocked others while cloaked in humor. The host's face betrayed a flicker of vulnerability, his polished facade cracking under the weight of the guest's words. The audience, split between gasps and cheers, felt the ground shift. The YouTube channel's promise of dissecting unfiltered talk show moments had never felt more potent as this clash spiraled into a spectacle of pride and power. Colbert, fighting to reclaim his authority, leaned forward, his voice tight with barely concealed rage. He accused Musk of arrogance, of believing his wealth and intellect placed him above scrutiny. The jab was meant to rally the crowd, but it landed weakly, overshadowed by the guest's unshakable resolve. Musk didn't hesitate. His response was a calculated blend of disdain and conviction, dismantling Colbert's accusation by pointing out the host's reliance on scripted outrage to fuel his show. He suggested that Colbert's attacks were less about truth and more about pandering to an audience that craved drama over substance. The words cut deep, exposing the mechanics of late-night television in a way that made the crowd squirm. Some clapped, drawn to Musk's audacity, while others booed, loyal to their host but unsettled by the guest's precision. Colbert's eyes narrowed, his frustration mounting as he realized Musk was not only holding his ground, but gaining it. The host tried to pivot, shifting to Musk's controversial social media presence, framing it as reckless and divisive. The move backfired. Musk seized the opportunity, turning the critique into a broader indictment of the media's role in amplifying division. He accused Colbert of being part of that machine, selectively curating narratives to keep viewers hooked while ignoring the nuance of complex issues. The guest's voice grew steadier, his argument weaving together personal conviction and biting sarcasm. He pointed out the irony of a comedian lecturing a technologist on responsibility, a remark so sharp it drew a collective wince from the audience. The YouTube channel's viewers, glued to their screens, would feel the weight of this moment, the drama escalating with every exchange. Colbert, now visibly rattled, struggled to mask his discomfort, his usual quick wit dulled by the relentless pressure. Desperate to turn the tide, Colbert doubled down, invoking a recent scandal tied to one of Musk's companies, where critics had accused him of prioritizing profit over safety. The host framed it as a moral failing, hoping to paint Musk as callous. The audience leaned in, sensing blood in the water, but Musk was unfazed. His response was a masterclass in deflection, acknowledging the criticism but redirecting it toward the broader challenges of innovation. He challenged Colbert to name a single industry that hadn't faced similar growing pains, then twisted the knife by suggesting the host's own network had dodged accountability for years. The accusation was bold, borderline rude, and it landed, with devastating impact. The crowd erupted, some cheering Musk's nerve, others stunned by his willingness to drag Colbert's world into the fray. Colbert's composure unraveled further. His next retort, meant to dismiss Musk's point, came off as flustered, his words stumbling over themselves. The host accused the guest of derailing the conversation, but the charge felt hollow, a last-ditch effort to regain control. Musk, sensing weakness, pressed his advantage. His voice took on a quieter, more deliberate tone, one that commanded the room's attention. He spoke of the stakes behind his work, the sacrifices made to push humanity forward, and the cowardice of those who critiqued from the sidelines. The words weren't just a defense, they were an indictment of Colbert's entire approach. The audience sat in stunned silence, the weight of Musk's conviction palpable. Colbert's face flushed, his authority slipping away as the guest prepared to deliver a blow that would redefine the night. The stage was set for a confrontation that would leave no one untouched, pushing the drama to its breaking point. The studio crackled with tension as Elon Musk's piercing words left Stephen Colbert exposed, his authority crumbling under the guest's unrelenting assault. Musk's indictment, framing the host as a sideline critic lacking the courage to face real stakes, hung heavy, silencing the crowd. The YouTube channel's viewers, immersed in the unfolding drama, could feel the shift. This was no longer a talk show segment, but a raw, unscripted battle of wills. Colbert, his face a mask of strained composure, scrambled to respond. His voice carried a forced calm as he accused Musk of grandstanding, of using lofty ideals to dodge accountability for his failures. The jab was meant to sting, to paint the guest as a dreamer disconnected from reality, but it fell flat, drowned out by the weight of Musk's earlier conviction. Musk seized the moment with a predator's precision. His response was measured, yet venomous, dismantling Colbert's accusation by highlighting the host's reliance on safe, predictable narratives. He suggested that Colbert's platform thrived on tearing down those who dared to act, while offering no solutions of its own. The words were a gut punch, accusing the host of intellectual cowardice in front of a live audience. The crowd's reaction was a chaotic mix of gasps and cheers, some rattled by Musk's audacity, others captivated by his refusal to yield. Colbert's eyes betrayed a flicker of panic, his usual charm buried under the pressure of a guest who seemed to anticipate every move. The YouTube channel's promise of raw commentary felt visceral now, each moment fueling the viewer's hunger for what came next. Desperate to shift the narrative, Colbert tried a new angle, invoking the public's growing unease with unchecked tech moguls. He framed Musk as a symbol of that distrust, questioning whether his vision for the future left room for those who couldn't keep up. The question was pointed, tapping into a cultural nerve that resonated with many in the audience. For a moment it seemed Colbert had regained footing, the crowd murmuring in approval. But Musk was ready. His voice took on a steely edge as he countered, accusing the host of fear-mongering to mask his own irrelevance in a rapidly changing world. He pointed out the irony of a comedian critiquing progress while profiting from a system that stifled it. The remark was rude, cutting through the studio's pretense with surgical precision, and it left Colbert visibly shaken. The audience sensed the tide turning. Musk's relentless logic and unapologetic demeanor were dismantling Colbert's carefully crafted persona. The host, now cornered, made a risky move, referencing a personal anecdote from Musk's past, a moment of vulnerability that had once humanized him but now felt like ammunition. Colbert wielded it to suggest Musk's idealism was a facade, hiding a colder, more calculating ambition. The crowd held its breath, expecting the guest to falter. But Musk's response was devastating. He turned the personal attack into a broader critique, accusing Colbert of exploiting private struggles for cheap applause. His words carried a quiet fury, exposing the host's tactics as manipulative and hollow. The studio erupted, the audience torn between shock and awe at Musk's ability to flip the script. Colbert's control slipped further, his next retort stumbling as he accused Musk of being combative to avoid tough questions. The charge felt desperate, a shadow of the host's earlier confidence. Musk, sensing the endgame, leaned forward, his gaze locked on Colbert. His voice dropped, each word deliberate, as he delivered a scathing assessment of the host's career, framing it as a monument to mediocrity, built on mocking the brave. The insult was brutal, a direct challenge to Colbert's legacy, and it landed with crushing force. The crowd's reaction was electric, a cacophony of cheers and boos that signaled the confrontation's peak. Colbert's face flushed, his hands gripping the desk as he realized the segment was spiraling beyond salvage. The stage was set for a final reckoning, one that would cement Musk's dominance and leave the YouTube channel's viewers reeling from the intensity. The studio vibrated with raw intensity as Stephen Colbert gripped his desk, his composure shattered by Elon Musk's brutal takedown. The guest's accusation that Colbert's career was a monument to mediocrity echoed like a verdict, stripping the host of his carefully curated authority. The audience, caught in the whirlwind of this unscripted clash, was a mix of stunned silence and fervent cheers, their emotions mirroring the chaos unfolding. The YouTube channel's viewers, watching the segment later, would feel their hearts race, the drama reaching a crescendo that demanded their full attention. Colbert, his face a mask of barely contained fury, tried to muster a response. His voice cracked slightly as he accused Musk of crossing a line, of turning a civil conversation into a personal vendetta. The words were meant to rally sympathy, but they sounded hollow, overshadowed by the guest's commanding presence. Musk, unrelenting, saw no need to soften his approach. His response was a masterclass in controlled aggression, dismantling Colbert's plea by pointing out the host's own role in escalating the conflict. He suggested that Colbert had baited him from the start, using loaded questions to provoke a spectacle for ratings. The accusation was a dagger, implying the host had orchestrated the chaos only to crumble when it backfired. The crowd gasped, some nodding as they recognized the truth in Musk's words, others bristling at the audacity. Colbert's eyes flashed with defiance, but the spark was dimming, his usual wit buried under the weight of a confrontation he could no longer steer. The YouTube channel's promise of raw, unfiltered moments felt almost prophetic now, as the segment teetered on the edge of collapse. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Colbert pivoted to a broader critique, framing Musk as a symbol of unchecked power in an era of growing inequality. He leaned into the audience's fears, suggesting the guest's vision for the future prioritized the elite over the vulnerable. The move was calculated, tapping into a cultural pulse that could sway the room. For a moment, the crowd murmured in agreement, their loyalty to the host flickering back to life. But Musk was ready, his mind a step ahead. His voice took on a quieter, almost mournful tone as he countered, accusing Colbert of weaponizing class divides to deflect from his own complicity in a broken system. He pointed out the host's ties to a media empire that profited from the same inequalities he decried, a remark so pointed it left the audience reeling. The studio erupted, the divide between cheers and boos growing louder. Colbert, now cornered, made a fatal mistake. His frustration boiled over, and he lashed out, accusing Musk of being a narcissist who thrived on chaos. The insult was raw, unpolished, and it betrayed the host's unraveling state. The crowd sensed the desperation, their murmurs turning to uneasy silence. Musk's response was devastatingly calm, his words slicing through the tension like a blade. He turned the accusation back, suggesting that Colbert's need for applause revealed a deeper insecurity, a fear of being irrelevant in a world that valued action over talk. The remark was cruel, yet laced with a truth that made it impossible to dismiss. The audience's reaction was visceral, a wave of gasps and cheers that signaled Musk's dominance. The YouTube channel's viewers would feel the weight of this moment, the guest's precision dismantling the host's last defenses. The segment reached its breaking point. Colbert, his face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation, tried to pivot to a lighter topic, but the gesture felt futile, a surrender disguised as strategy. Musk, sensing the end, leaned back, his demeanor radiating quiet triumph. His final words were a subtle but searing critique, framing the host as a relic of an era that rewarded style over substance. The audience sat in stunned silence, the weight of the exchange settling over them. Colbert's hands trembled slightly, his authority obliterated as he faced the reality of a guest who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. The stage was set for now. A final explosive moment, one that would cement Musk's victory and leave the YouTube channel's viewers in awe of the confrontation's unrelenting intensity. The studio was a cauldron of raw emotion as Stephen Colbert sat exposed, his attempt to salvage the segment crumbling under Elon Musk's unrelenting dominance. The guest's final critique, framing the host as a relic of a shallow era, had left the audience in a state of awe and unease. The YouTube channel's viewers, captivated by the slow-burn destruction of a talk show titan, felt the weight of a moment that transcended entertainment. Colbert, his hands still trembling, tried to muster a response, his voice strained as he accused Musk of derailing the show with his combative attitude. The words were a desperate plea for control, but they rang hollow, drowned out by the guest's towering presence. The crowd, once loyal to their host, now wavered, their murmurs a mix of shock and reluctant admiration for Musk's unyielding resolve. Musk, poised like a victor surveying a battlefield, didn't let the moment pass. His response was a quiet, deliberate evisceration, accusing Colbert of inviting conflict only to wilt when it arrived. He suggested the host had underestimated him, expecting a guest who would play along with the scripted dance of late-night television. The words were laced with a biting condescension, implying Colbert's entire career was built on facing opponents too weak to fight back. The audience gasped, the insult landing with a force that stripped the host of his remaining dignity. Some cheered, drawn to Musk's fearless conviction, while others sat in stunned silence, grappling with the unraveling of their beloved figure. The YouTube channel's promise of raw, unfiltered commentary had culminated in a moment that would be dissected for weeks. Colbert, his face a mask of humiliation, made one final attempt to regain footing. He leaned forward, his voice rising as he ordered Musk to leave the set, framing it as a stand against disrespect. The command was meant to rally the crowd, to paint the host as a man of principle standing up to a bully. But the gesture backfired. Musk leaned back, a faint smirk crossing his face, and delivered a parting shot that sealed his triumph. He accused Colbert of ejecting him not out of strength, but out of fear, a desperate act to silence a truth he couldn't counter. The words were rude, unapologetic, and devastatingly precise, exposing the host's ejection as a confession of defeat. The studio erupted, the audience's reaction a chaotic blend of boos for Colbert's retreat and cheers for Musk's audacity as a... Musk stood, his posture radiating quiet confidence. The crowd's energy shifted decisively. Some rose to their feet, clapping not just for the guest but for the raw honesty of the moment. Colbert, left alone at his desk, stared ahead, his expression a mix of anger and resignation. The YouTube channel's viewers would feel a surge of exhilaration, the emotional arc of the confrontation resolving in a victory that felt earned. Musk's departure was not a retreat, but a coronation. His every step off the set, a reminder of his command over the night. The audience, both in the studio and at home, was left grappling with the weight of what they'd witnessed, their perceptions of both men forever altered. The segment ended with Colbert attempting to transition to a lighter segment, but the effort felt forced, his usual charm extinguished by the ordeal. The YouTube channel's viewers, reflecting on the clash, would see Musk's triumph as more than a personal victory. It was a challenge to the polished artifice of media, a call to value substance over spectacle. The host's decision to kick Musk off the set, meant as a show of strength, had instead cemented his embarrassment, a moment of vulnerability that no amount of laughter could erase. The story closed with a sense of finality, the audience satisfied by a confrontation that had peeled back layers of pretense to reveal something raw and undeniable. Musk's victory was complete, a testament to his ability to turn a hostile stage into a platform for his unyielding vision.